share the path that led you to ice cream?
Yes. So I grew up in Greenwich, Connecticut. I was a senior in high school. I saw an advertisement in the newspaper that said drive an ice cream truck, earn $500 a week. This was 2002. I did that as a summer job. I did great. I really enjoyed it. I went to college for 1 year. I then decided not to go back to college and to spend 5 months operating that Good Humor ice cream truck. I saved $35,000 in 5 months. This was 2003. I took that money. I traveled all over Europe, Southeast Asia, back to Europe for 9 months. I was really inspired by and sort of impressed by the quality of food and interested in that. Fast forward 3 years later, I'm graduating from college. I did go back to college and I had okay grades, but I wasn't on this typical wealthy suburb kid tri-state area path of becoming a banker or becoming a lawyer. And I loved food. The only way I'd ever earned money or good money was driving an ice cream truck. I saw Mr. Softy truck one day in the city, and I thought, why don't we do really, really good ice cream off of a truck? And that was the idea. And the idea, even from day one, I'm not going to BS and be like, we were these, simple kids who just wanted a truck. Like, we wanted to make it big. I
Sure.
thought we had hundreds and thousands of trucks all over the country. But it was, so yeah, that was the birth of the idea.
And I guess the question I think I was 3 concepts in before I had even conceptualized the idea of the question.
Mhm.
But if I could go back and do it all over again, I think the question that we have to ask ourselves is, does the world need another Mexican cantina? Does it need another Italian restaurant? Does it really need another premium ice cream brand? You know, how did you answer that question,
Yeah.
especially in those
So,
early days?
and I didn't think of it in that kind of business concept the way you just described it. But, for us, it was, yeah, I mean, we were sort of subconsciously creating this because we couldn't find it.
Sure.
I should actually say we didn't know we couldn't find it. Originally, we weren't going to make our own ice cream. We said, let's get this truck and let's buy some really good ice cream. We defined that as tons of cream, tons of eggs, no stabilizers, and great ingredients like pistachios from Sicily, chocolate from little farms in Ecuador, strawberries always ripened in the sun, vanilla aged in oak barrels with vodka, and then whole vanilla beans as well. Um, and we started looking around and like it didn't exist. We found some good gelato shops. Grom out of Italy had a few shops in the US and we liked that. So we said, we have to make our own ice cream. Haagen-Dazs, Ben and Jerry's, it's good, right? But it wasn't to that level. Obviously it still isn't. So yeah, we realized there was empty space in the market for a product like this. Not only clean label, because that existed, but incredibly luxurious from a base standpoint. Base in ice cream means like how much eggs, how much cream, are you using stabilizers? And then from an ingredient standpoint, like go as artisanal as a Michelin star chef will on this product that we're selling out of an ice cream truck.
And you think to yourself, I can remember when I started the bar in Hollywood. It was like this New Orleans inspired concept. And my business partner goes like, this is so good. Why hasn't anyone done this yet? And I was like, because either we're idiots or we're geniuses,
Exactly.
right? It's going to be, you're crazy until you're a genius. And it just so happened that it worked out. But through that whole process at what was a very young age, I couldn't help but ask myself, like, is there a reason no one's done this yet? And then, you look at, whether we're talking about direct to consumer or CPG, like using best in class ingredients and best in class processes. It makes sense, right? But you've got to assume that there's a reason that people aren't doing it. And it probably has to do with the prohibitive nature of the cost and what is a low margin thing,
Yeah,
right?
I did. It's funny. Like I thought about that in that way. My brother Peter, who's 7 years older than me, Gen X, maybe a little less, both from personality and the generation, like he's a little less blindly positive and optimistic than me. So I wasn't thinking about that, but he was. He was saying, if this fancy truck in New York City thing worked, like it's New York, wouldn't someone else have done it? But I think part of it was like the benefit of youth. This extreme confidence that it's funny as a 23-year-old, I had a different kind of confidence that I have now as this, at least on the surface, extremely accomplished entrepreneur to just be like, we can do whatever we want. We can
It's going to be
absolutely,
great. How
yeah,
hard could it
yeah,
possibly
yeah,
be,
totally,
Ben?
totally. Because I think if you did know, a lot fewer
Sure.
people would do it. So you need that youthful energy sometimes to get things out.
Oh my God, I can remember I was having this conversation with my mother years ago. And she was like, knowing what you know now, because I was 17 when I left. I just actually just or no, I was 20 when I left home and moved to Los Angeles. And she goes, knowing everything that was going to happen. Like if you could only change one thing, what would it be? And I said, if I knew everything I knew now, I would have just stayed in Baton Rouge, right? Because it's so overwhelming and the hurdles were so vast. I would ask you going into it, you did have assumptions, I'm sure, that it was going to be really difficult, right? But what were the surprises? What was easier than you thought? And what was more difficult than you thought?
I'll go to right now. What's much more difficult than I thought, and it's something that I didn't even contemplate, was how complex and how impactful being efficient on supply chain is.
Mm,
I don't even think I knew what supply chain meant 19
sure.
years ago. I mean, I guess I could have conceptualized it, but um, that's really challenging. And it takes a lot of work. And this is like the non-sexy, glamorous stuff. But, when I talk to, budding entrepreneurs or, pre-revenue entrepreneurs who are going into CPG, I'm like, guys, you got to figure out sales 100%. Like that's going to make or break everything. But your fulfillment costs can be 5% or 20. The close, I mean, this depends on the product, but the closer you are, like it's the easiest and hardest place to make margin, right? Because it's not sales. So you have like more control over it in a way. So I did not anticipate how much expertise, kind of like creative thinking and just attention supply chain would require. Meaning keep fulfillment costs as low as possible. The COG side, the cost to produce ice cream, is actually much less complex than fulfillment cost. There's challenges, right? There's creative ways to reduce costs and, keep quality steady, but supply chain's a lot harder. And by that I mean, for those who are watching, supply chain cost, fulfillment cost is ice cream is produced at factory, ice cream gets to UNFI distribution center. Does that cost 5% of your product price or 20? And it can range.
Talk to me about your evolution as a leader. I mean, I'm sure that in the very beginning, you were very focused on the quality of the product and this needs to taste exactly this way. And then eventually the business grows around you and you have to grow along with it.
Mhm. My evolution as you're editing this, right? Or is it
I
just,
am.
okay, yeah.
Yeah.
Because I'm going to pause a little bit. So I
Can
think
I
what I'm
frame the
really,
question for you?
no, it works. I'll go for it. Yeah.
Okay.
I mean, what I'm really leadership wise, I think what I'm naturally good at and what I've always been good at from day one is like being really optimistic, passionate, and excited. People respond to that. They like being around it. It gets them excited. Where I've had to evolve is listening more than talking, I think. I think that's really important. It feels great to talk. I was in an interview with a candidate. This was probably 6 years ago. My newly hired COO was with me, and the interview finished. And I said, they were awesome. And she said, Ben, how do you know? You spent the entire interview talking about the business. But the point, it was interesting. So I felt like they were awesome because, and maybe I was right? But like, because I felt really good because I got to talk about the business. So you learn with your ears, not your mouth. I really like that one. Someone said that to me years ago. And then, I mean, not what I'm going to say is cliche, but like, find people who disagree with you, who fill gaps, in your competencies. Um, but then on the flip side, you as as an entrepreneur CEO, when your intuition is strong and people are throwing data and rationalizations that go against your intuition at you, go with your intuition. Whenever I have not done it on that, I've regretted it, and it has been very objectively like could be chalked up as a mistake.
Let's talk about positioning for a second. So you don't sell ice cream because you could buy ice cream at the grocery store and everyone's got ice cream in their house. So when people go out to one of your locations or they go visit one of your food trucks or they're buying pints of your ice cream for their house, They're not buying ice cream. In your mind, what are they buying?
Well, they are buying ice cream.
They
Explain.
are they yes, they
Yeah.
are buying ice cream, right?
Yeah, this feels like a marketing PR sort of response, but
What do you think you
I,
sell?
I
You,
guess I
you know
guess
what I mean?
they're buying. I could say they're buying an affordable luxury, right? Which is what we wanted to be. We wanted to do ice cream, almost as well as it could possibly be done. Sure, it's more expensive than a little more than Haagen-Dazs and Ben and Jerry's, a lot more than the gallon you can buy at Walmart for $2.99. But a lot of people, if they really want it, are able to afford it at least once in a while. So that always excited me, right? Three Michelin dining, couture fashion, like it's cool, it's impressive, it's awesome. I'm not knocking it all. But the one thing that never sort of drew me to that sort of end of luxury is like it's not attainable for most.
Right.
I love the fact that we serve, tens of thousands of people every day, soon to be hundreds of thousands.
When you look at attainable luxury, so much of it is rooted in price and perception, which was something we were talking about right before the call. I think that when economic times are great, everybody's talking about price in this industry. When
Yeah,
times are terrible, everybody's talking about price in this industry. In being on the premium side of your vertical, $10 is expensive relative to $2, right? So on your side of it, what have you learned over the years about price
sure.
and
Well,
perceived
I should say
value?
we range from $6.99 to like $7.99 in CPG in the grocery stores for a 14-ounce little. It looks like a pint, but it's a little less than a pint. But sorry, say the question once more.
It's what have you learned about price and perceived value? Because I think that in the industry there are all of these limiting beliefs around
Yeah.
price.
Well, I think it differs in CPG and brick and mortar. So we have our 104 corporate owned scoop shops throughout the US in 15 states, and then we sell in 10,000 grocery stores. I actually think price is much more important in CPG than scoop shop. So what I mean by that is decadence, I don't think is, or I should say, indulgence in brick and mortar, I don't think is that price elastic. To an extent, it is. If we started charging $20 a scoop tomorrow, Josh, you'd walk in and be like, "What the fuck? Like $20 is like that's absurd." But whether it's like 650 or 850, like, and you're bringing your family, like it's kind of expensive, right? And you're not going every day. It's not like Starbucks. It's not like a coffee shop. So there, we actually have a little more room to make the margin we need to make. CPG is tougher. I think in part because you're looking at a freezer. You have anywhere from half a dozen to 2 dozen brands, depending on the grocery store you're in, and you're comparing, right? Their chocolate's $8.99. Their chocolate has packaging that looks just as artisanal and it's $4.99. A lot of consumers are going to go with the $4.99. So there, you've just got to build brand affinity, right? And it works if the product, I believe it works like if the product is distinctly better. That's why I've always focused is like, PRE as this sounds like product first. Strip the packaging away, strip the branding away, strip the marketing away, the storytelling. You just have a cup of ice cream. Does that taste better? Does that give you a better experience in Haagen-Dazs? Because if it wasn't, I'd be so bored in this business. It'd make no point.
Sure.
It's all just hocus pocus marketing, painting stuff on packaging. Um, and it doesn't always work in the short term. But what I've invested literally like almost 20 years of my life in is a belief that it works. And that it's sort of it's an empathy and respect for the consumer. It's saying I'm not going to charge you more and tell you something is artisanal if I'm not really going to make you a product that's better. I got a little bit off your question there.
No, you did, but it's okay because I like the direction you're headed in. And I would ask, as it relates to the trajectory. So what I have found is that the more at bats I get, right, the longer that I'm in the industry, the simpler it is. I find that the bigger the business, the simpler the model.
Yeah.
And and it's which is hard to explain, but I've consulted for
Mhm.
hundreds of restaurants at this point,
Yeah.
and eventually you begin to see the through lines. And
Yeah.
one of the things you mentioned is you've been doing this for almost 2 decades now, which is a long time to be doing the same thing, getting better at the same thing, refining the same thing. Um, what is the business model? Is it trucks into CPG and then scoop shops into CPG? What does the funnel look like to where you feel like you truly own a customer?
The funnel of truly owning a customer for us works like this. We either meet the customer in the grocery store for the first time, right, in terms of them getting the product, or we meet them in our scoop shop for the first time. They have an experience, they have a distinct experience saying, for me, the highest butterfat, highest egg ice cream on the market that is sourcing pistachios from the slopes of Mount Etna in Sicily and chocolate that is fermented for 5 days at great permaculture farms and strawberries that are always ripened in the sun, never picked before that, tastes better. And I want it. And we spend virtually nothing on marketing. That's actually a big opportunity. I'm not saying that as a brag. I'm saying that as a big opportunity. So it is word of mouth. That's how we're capturing them. We want to be there for them, right? So that means in Texas, we're in HEB and Central Market and Sprouts and Whole Foods and Kroger and Target. And we give them scoop shops in Dallas and Houston and hopefully Austin soon when we find the real estate there, because it's tough. I can give you the kind of like, not throwaway, but like MBA speak of like this flywheel marketing effect of,
Sure.
I used to think, wait, if we put the ice cream in a lot of grocery stores where we have scoop shops, our sales are going to go down, right? Because they're going to buy it at the grocery store. It's a better value. It's cheaper per ounce. Absolute opposite occurs. And that's the sort of, I think, our primal instinct to trust brand. That's tribal stuff. That's like in our DNA. I trust this brand. I've seen it a lot. It makes it harder to, come up, right? We're 20 years in and we're still like getting up there, becoming the third big super premium ice cream brand in the world, working hard to do that.
Hey, as you look at that growth, how are you defining the metrics over time? One of the biggest hurdles for me as an entrepreneur was delineating between more work and more money.
Yep.
Uh, right? How do you make that delineation now,
Yeah,
and how has that served you well
yeah,
or poorly in the past?
sure. And by the way, everything I'm saying, and I always want to tell this to people because I think it's empowering. I hope I sound very confident. I sound very sure of myself. I'm still learning, right? So a lot
Sure.
of this stuff I'm saying it and I want to do even better at it. But the sort of king of all of this stuff, metric, is cash, right? Cash is king. When you have cash on your balance sheet, you control your destiny. We do not live in a world anymore where investors are clamoring to invest in negative EBITDA businesses
Sure.
who are just focused on growth. Preserve cash. Now, preserve cash, build cash. How do you do that? You build a profitable business, right? You spend less money than you bring in. That is traditionally over the last, 150 years, how most people have gotten rich. In the last 30 years, a lot of people have gotten rich, never making a dollar of profit, right? That's kind of a new thing. So I like that old fashioned concept of running a business that makes money. And very, very focused on that. But how do you do that? What are the KPIs? Really tactically, it's same store sales, both from a pricing and traffic standpoint. So we want our guests to be getting more waffle cones, getting more toppings, trying the sundaes. The ticket goes up, right? I also think it's an even more exciting, immersive experience when you're getting ice
Sure.
cream toppings. And then in the CPG side, you're looking at velocity. Velocity means how many units are you selling per store per week. So if I say my velocity, I'm going to make this up, is 10 on vanilla and Whole Foods, that means on average we're selling 10 14-ounce cups of vanilla per Whole Foods store per week. How do you drive that velocity? Promotion, right? But you don't want to go too heavy on the promotion. Does cutting $1 drive more sales? Or sorry, does cutting $2 drive more sales than cutting $1? Because if it doesn't, just cut $1 because those promotions are really expensive. Shelf space, right? If I'm on the top shelf or the bottom shelf, I am definitely moving less product than if I am at eye level. So I'm telling you all this because this stuff is hard It's imperfect. It's never going to be perfect. And I think if you wait for perfect, you're always going to be frustrated. So for me, I used to walk into the Whole Foods or the Sprouts or the Walmarts when we were in there. So, oh my God, the product's here. Now I sort of take it. When I'm in my best mind space, I take it. I say, okay. I send the pictures to our sales team and our marketing team, and I say, Whole Foods Silver Lake is, short. They have five less SKUs than Whole Foods Buy. Why? Whole Foods Austin is absolutely awesome. We're at eye level. We're at four shelves. And as I'm saying all this too, what I enjoy most, which, because you said before, Josh, you can be in business and say, this isn't what I signed up for. This isn't fun. But I love being on the ground. I love being in the scoop shops and the grocery stores, seeing everything. And I find when I do that, I do my best work, like being immersed in the business.
Let's talk about that immersion. So I spent most of my professional life just spinning my wheels. The feeling of being busy without actually being productive.
Mhm.
And
Mm, yeah,
and so now what I spend all of my time doing is reminding myself like what the main thing is. Like this is Michael Michalowicz from Profit First also wrote another book called Clockwork. And in the book, he talks about the QBR, the queen bee role,
hmm,
which is the role in the business that makes money, the thing that the engine that drives everything, and everybody works in service of this queen bee role. And in doing so, or in learning that, what it did was it gave me focus, like unparalleled focus, to just focus, keep the main thing, and not forget that the main thing is the main thing.
yeah.
What is that in your business, and how do you serve that?
It's sales. That's kind of what you're asking, right?
Like what? Yes. What is the thing that you're tracking every day, that you're trying to influence every day, that ultimately determines?
Sales, 100% sales. Now, that's a very simple single KPI to look at, right? But it drives everything.
But are you looking at that, like the lagging indicator? Are you looking at the sales numbers, or are you looking at the leading indicators, the numbers that contribute to the revenue?
everything. So it's extraordinarily complex, right? I'm looking at the sales every day.
Especially in your business
Yeah,
model.
yeah. I'm looking at scoop shop sales every day. So this is our sales by store, by market compared to last year. I'm looking at the breakdown of deliveries versus in store. And I'm looking at wholesale sales, which is much more complex to analyze and look at once a month by retailer, by SKU, looking at velocities. So there's the top line things, right? From there, you go to innovation because that is how you drive sales. I think whether that's service innovation in the scoop shops, whether that's marketing innovation on how we're promoting, or of course, what people naturally think of when they think of innovation, product innovation. And that's about like empathizing with the guest in the scoop shops and the consumer in CPG, which I say this confidently, but it's incredibly challenging. Like, I want to know what they want. That sounds easy, right? What do they want? I want to give them what they want. If we
Do
can,
they even know what they want, Ben?
sometimes no.
What's the Henry Ford quote? If if I gave the consumers what they wanted, I would have built a faster horse.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. And ice cream is a much lower investment purchase, right? Therefore, I think in that sense, they even know what they want less. I cannot interview, I've never paid for market research because I think the methodologies on this kind of thing, I question them so much and it's so difficult. But more than that, you don't really know what you want. It's more what is driving you to grab the Van Leeuwen mango sticky rice from Whole Foods, which was one of our best selling SKUs of all time. I was excited about that flavor, but I'm not going to take credit for it being so successful. I did not think it would do that much better than what else did we launch last year? Than the gooey butter cake with candied pecans, or maybe that one didn't have candied pecans. So sometimes they don't. But this brings me to, which I said before, and you asked me how I lead and what makes me, or what I think makes a good leader. For me, I'm focused on sales. That's how we grow, right? I'm focused on profitability, expense control, but without the revenue, none of that other stuff matters. You got to build the revenue. How do you build revenue in a market, the US market, right? The most competitive consumer products market on earth, right? The most entrepreneurial place on earth. You do this by experimenting endlessly, failing quickly, and moving on or pivoting. That's how it's going to work, right? You got to try a lot. Sometimes we feel like we got really lucky. You know how you get lucky? Try 100 things and one of them.
For sure.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
Yeah. And it
Dude, I
feels
attribute
like,
all of my success to thinking like a restaurateur, but behaving like a marketer. Constant
yeah,
iteration, really quick, really low stakes
yeah,
experiments.
exactly. And the low stakes is key. When you move too slowly, it takes too much work and you're not going to do enough.
So when I get into a restaurant, I think people assume that as it relates to marketing, what you're going to do is you're just going to bolt on a bunch of shit. But
Hmm.
that's not really what great marketing is. What I think great marketing is pulling away everything that is not that core essential brand. And then also eliminating the assumptions and limiting beliefs that people have about their market, right? If something performs well or it performs poorly,
Mhm.
you have a tendency to make a story around it, right? Like, this is why it did so well. This is why it did so poorly. When you talk about innovation, I think it's so fun to sit with like other restaurateurs and hospitality brands and wax philosophical on innovation. I think that we love innovation, we prize innovation. But then you look at the consumer base, and the consumer base prizes consistency,
Hmm.
right? Most people are going to look at all of your spectacular flavors and go, "These sound great.
I
I'll
will.
have the vanilla,"
Yeah.
right? It's the reason, it's that paradox between like the number of cans of Red Bull that are sold every year and the number of squirrel suits sold for base jumping, right?
Mm. Yeah.
Every Everybody wants to feel adventurous, right? But they don't actually want to be adventurous. How do you, like, when I look at flavor profiles like ranch, Grey Poupon, mac and cheese, right? How do you determine like what is innovation for innovation's sake and what is like scratching an unknown itch in the market?
Huh. Wait, explain innovation for innovation's sake, but compared to scratching an unknown, like would scratching an unknown itch be like
Like, it's like there,
creating?
I believe that especially in CPG, there are some brands that release flavor profiles just to be disruptive,
Totally, totally.
right? Just
Yeah,
to make it weird, just
yeah,
to start a conversation.
yeah. So like over the last 5 years, starting with Kraft mac and cheese, we've launched, at least a dozen flavors where we did not anticipate keeping them on the menu, keeping them in our SKU set for CPG. I mentioned before we spend very, very little on marketing, but in that sense, we put a lot of mind share towards these innovative products that we know are going to be an LTO drop, that we know are not going to be our customers' forever products, but that will build excitement. And in this world, in this digital world where so many eyeballs are on their phones, they're going to get social media impressions. Kraft got 11 billion impressions. I think Hidden Valley Ranch got a similar number of impressions. Our VP of marketing, Katie Roberts, calls it like the yellow shoe effect. It's going to get attention. It's going to get them into the brand, maybe into the store, maybe into the supermarket. Even if they don't buy it, you know, we're getting attention. And you have to do that now. It's very counter to the brands I dream of, the concepts that I dream of, which is like a simple ice cream shop that's using the best ingredients. But if that's all you do and you want to grow and you want to be our size, it's really, really hard to compete. So I'm doing those flavors to get attention. Now, to plug Van Leeuwen's quality and sourcing ethos, we only do those flavors when we can do them adhering to our sourcing and quality ethos. So no natural flavors, only whole ingredients, only natural coloring. So things like that.
And do you have a muse? Like, when you look at it, doesn't even need to be in the industry, but like there's certainly brands that I look to and I'm like, oh, I just want a little piece of that in my
Yeah.
own business. Who inspires you?
A muse. Yeah, wait, let me think about that for a second. Oh, I'm doing a muse. Yeah, sort of by muse, are you kind of meaning like brands I'm really inspired by?
Absolutely. Like,
Yeah,
I want,
cool.
like, I want to encapsulate this aspect
Yeah,
of this
yeah.
brand.
I will. I'm going to sound incredibly cliche, but from a brick and mortar standpoint, Starbucks. They build absolutely beautiful stores. Often before I see what it is, I'm struck by this amazing third wave coffee shop that I didn't know that opened. And I'm like, oh, that's a Starbucks. Um, the service is really, really good. So from that service and store design standpoint, the extraordinary innovation they do on store design, I'm inspired by. From a product and marketing standpoint, I'm really sort of impressed and influenced by high fashion or mass fashion sort of collaborating with each other, or mass fashion collaborating with smaller, not high fashion, but sort of streetwear brands. Because I think that brings new people into the brand. You know, Adidas, um, that 10 years ago did a collab. They do so many collaborations, but it was a collaboration with a Canadian sort of like sportswear company called Reigning Champs. And I guarantee you, no one made any money off of it, right? But it sort of built even more affinity for me with both brands. Obviously, nobody needed to be brought into Adidas, but it probably brought some people into Reigning Champs. You know, for the thoughtful consumer, you know, you're like, that's cool. Adidas is collaborating with this little sportswear brand out of Vancouver. How do you objectively define the marketing value of that stuff? It's really, really hard. But we love doing that stuff. I was a little late to this meeting because I was 15 blocks away at the Van Leeuwen Flavor Lab. This is our innovation kitchen, tasting room, and ice cream shop, all separated by glass walls and that can retract. So it's this big space where we bring innovation directly to the customer. But we did that because it allows us to not only it allows us to rapidly innovate because the innovation is very low lift because we're just doing it at that store. So we were doing a call with a really unique mezcal brand that makes mezcal with a rare agave. It's not smoky at all. And, you know, a 30-minute meeting, and we're having a mezcal party in May with mezcal soft serve coming out of a machine and mezcal milkshakes. And my point here is no one's making money off that, right? But it's going to bring people into the brand. But that really, we started doing it, but I think it's done so effectively in fashion and in a really cool way.
I agree. You know, when I look at muses for the restaurant industry, the two verticals I look at are I look at fashion, because I think they do a great job around ownership, right? People like us do these things, that quote from Seth Godin that if you wear Chanel, it says something about who you are as a
Right.
person. Which, you know, I think that the same could be true for the same could be said for your ice cream brand. But then I also look to credit card companies, which is the next thing I want to talk about. I think there's so much to admire about the way credit card companies position their brands, especially around loyalty. They all sell the same service, right? They loan you money at high interest. But
Mm-hmm.
there are Chase Sapphire people and there are Amex Platinum people,
Mm-hmm.
right? And then there are people that are willing to spend $10,000, $15,000 for the opportunity to have Amex lend them money on a black card.
Right.
Um, and the only thing that differentiates them are the loyalty perks, like what
Mm.
you get when you are a member of this brand. How do you approach loyalty? You know, through the truck, through the scoop shops, and then
I
through
mean, yeah.
CPG.
I mean, Josh, to answer it tactically, like we don't yet have a loyalty program. We're working on one now. I actually don't believe for ice cream it's as important because the frequency on ice cream is fairly low. So you are so I this is what I think. I don't think guests are saying, "Oh, I'm going to go to Van Leeuwen today because I want to get that 10th scoop." Because a lot of guests are just coming once in a while. You know, it's a very decadent thing. Now, I'm flying to Miami tomorrow morning. Tomorrow night, we're doing a preview of the first Van Leeuwen hybrid frozen yogurt ice cream shop. I'm so excited about the frozen yogurt. It's organic Bulgarian yogurt, super tart, and then a matcha neutral yogurt with 20 toppings, including our own pistachios from Sicily with the kataifi, that sort of Dubai chocolate thing. Um, why am I talking about this with loyalty? The frequency is really, really, really high with frozen yogurt. So we've never had a high frequency product in our brick and mortar shops. We've never had the opportunity to line extend into that in a way that's sort of relatable and makes sense. This is frozen dessert, right? We're not going to do sandwiches. We're not going to do soups, right? We're not doing sweet green. So sorry, that last part didn't make sense, but my point was this really works and it's higher frequency. So we'll probably like reconsider loyalty for that. But did you mean tactically like loyalty, or did you want me to talk about like how do we
Well,
build
just
brand
how
affinity?
you approach loyalty, how you go about taking somebody from I like this ice cream, which is great. Tons of people out there like that. To this is my favorite ice cream,
Mm,
smaller set, right? To this is
yeah,
my ice cream. So
yeah,
like when I'm going to a party, I always bring Van Leeuwen ice cream.
yeah. I think the way a brand, a food brick and mortar brand or CPG brand creates loyalty is creating craveable products, right? Products that sort of hook into the consciousness, right? Um, that you are going to think about and you are going to want to buy again. That sounds really simple. It's easy to do with flavors like vanilla, right? Everybody wants that. One of our best sellers is honeycomb. It's a very popular flavor in Australia and New Zealand. My co-founder Laura O'Neill's from that. We launched it like over a decade ago. Um, but it's something that like pulls people in and keeps them in. And the aim is to have them buy that and then try other stuff too.
Is there a trick to use case? So one of the things I'm always looking at is like, how does this thing fit into my life? And is there a world that exists where Van Leeuwen develops a frequency marketing strategy around this is how it fits into your life? Right, that it's because the false equivalent I'll give you is the bar that I owned in Hollywood cranked, right, but it cranked off the back of it was 900 square feet. All I needed was like 20 something full-blown alcoholics that were well networked to come in every night of the week. Frequency was a foregone conclusion in Hollywood 20 years ago. But then I got into fine dining, and the frequency is far less frequent.
Yeah,
And so what we had to do was we had to reposition, instead of this being about a fancy meal, like it became about revelry. This is where you celebrate. We're here for all of these different moments in your life. And in doing so, we redefined the brand through the way people would engage with it. And so with ice cream, I wonder, is there a similar opportunity? Is that an idea you guys have even explored?
either my brain is shutting down or my answer is going to be sort of boring. And I don't mean this in a negative way, but I think with ice cream there is a limit. Particularly in the markets we are where people are very health conscious, which means when they're going to indulge, they want Van Leeuwen. They want
For
something
sure.
that's worth it, that's clean label, that's delicious enough to make the calories worth it, right? Because let's face it, like dessert's not good for you, right? It's good for your soul, right? It makes you happy. But yeah, if I had zero care about how things tasted, I would never eat refined sugar. Um, so I think there's a limit there. So for us, how do we increase frequency? I mean, physically being where the customer is, right? Brick and mortar wise, putting stores where we think our guests are, not only on, Friday nights when they're going out, but on Sunday afternoons when they're taking a walk. So Brooklyn Bridge Park, Rockefeller Center. This is very tactical, right? What I'm talking about now. And then being in the grocery stores for them well. So just building this brand that is absolutely everywhere. So when the craving strikes, it's there, right? Because indulgence is often not planned. It's often an impulse purchase. That's why we need the foot traffic. I can't, even with a bar, certainly with a fine dining restaurant, you can be, fine dining restaurant can be in the, northern Sweden. And if it's good enough, they're going to be booked, 300 nights a year. But with ice cream, we need the foot traffic. There's some planned, but a lot of it's, I'm walking around. It's a beautiful Sunday afternoon. I'm on vacation in New York. There's ice cream. Let's get it.
Let's talk about tech. So, one of the things that you talked about earlier was this idea that you're constantly tracking numbers, especially revenue. What systems do you have in place to track revenue, to know how well you're doing at a moment's notice?
I use Square
Okay.
for my POS, which I really like it because there's so little friction. So I have the dashboard on my phone. I see sales in real time. The 5 minutes. The backup dashboard is, or not the backup dashboard, but the desktop dashboard is even more robust and comprehensive. Beyond that, when you're an operator of a business, with this much complexity, this many scoop shops, the sky is the limit for what you want from a data insight standpoint. So that's my finance and accounting team who were, always under resourced on, right? Just because we're a growing business and we're scrappy. but it's figuring out the dashboards we want. How do you incorporate weather into those dashboards? I want to know if my same store sales were down 10%, were we 80 degrees last year and 50 degrees this year? Because that explains it, right? Can I see weather by hour? We have not yet utilized any AI for that, but I have high hopes that I can create like incredible hourly weather things that will allow us to better labor plan, and say, this is how much we need on now, this is how much we need on now, based on how much ice cream you sell on an 82-degree Saturday afternoon in July, right?
We both mentor young entrepreneurs, and one of the biggest, I think, paradigm shifts for me over many years was asking a lot of questions around growth. Like, how big do I want to get? Why do I want to get that big? What does my life look like when I'm that big? And dude, you've been doing the same thing for 20 years. And
Yeah.
20 years ago, Ben probably had very different ideas on what growth and what winning look like.
Yeah,
Um,
absolutely.
so what does it look like today? What does winning look like in the next
Yeah.
5 years?
Um, so winning in the next 5 years to me looks like being really happy. Um, what does that look like? And that, as you said, that's changed. When we started Van Leeuwen with an ice cream truck that I bought on eBay for $5,000, I believed with every cell in my body that if I could get up to 10 ice cream trucks and have my own commissary, it would give me a sense of completeness and accomplishment that would just put me at peace forever. I mean, what I'm talking about now is just like human ambition, right? Call it ambition, call it greed. Ambition's a more positive way of putting it, but it's wanting to grow. Um, so, what does success look like for me in the next 5 years? Happiness. How do you get there? Do more of what you like, right? What do I like doing? I actually love talking to you about this. It's really enjoyable. I love doing product innovation. I love more than anything being in the ice cream shops and serving guests and working with the team. There's other stuff that isn't as enjoyable. With what we've built with our scale, we're looking for a path to do more of what we really like in life, and do the things we love. And also helping other people. I love, 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 advising and working with young entrepreneurs, and sort of, as we talked about before we started the interview, instead of broadly talking about how we succeeded and where we failed, telling them exactly what to do, because that's what I wanted. I wanted someone to say, do this, don't do that, and yeah, but that was a little broad. Hope that was an okay answer.
That was. One last question for you, and then I'll leave you alone. I know you have to go. Um, what should we steal from you? Like, when you look back over, what should we steal from you? When we look over the last 2 decades of all the success that you've achieved in an industry that is wrought with failure, and you've done well across multiple verticals, what are the tactics, the tools, the strategies that served you well that we could steal and
Yeah.
internalize?
So what served us well over the last 18 years, going into our 19th year of business, are like focus on the core and stick to your ethos. Our ethos was quality. It was, let's make the best ice cream we possibly can. 3 years ago, cream prices skyrocketed, egg prices skyrocketed. We were forecasting a $2 million hit to our EBITDA. Supply chain and finance came to me and said, Ben, here's the reformulation. We're cutting cream, we're cutting eggs. We're going to still be the highest on the market. And we can make up for $1 million of that $2 million. And I'm really proud of this. And that's why I'm sort of almost boasting about it. I said, absolutely not. We have to take that hit. We built this brand off making incredibly luxurious, like incredibly decadent ice cream. And that's what we have to stick to. Ice cream, super premium ice cream, has never been a trend product. We've gone viral with a few flavors, but the brand hasn't. It's something that I think primally, again, it's sort of locked into our brain. Lots of cream, lots of eggs, some refined sugar, yum, yum, yum. Do it as well as it can possibly be done. This is going to be my vanilla ice cream forever. So focusing on the core, sticking to that, committing to that is something that has really worked for us.
You nailed it.